Your 2024 just got bigger because Six Flags Great Adventure's biggest sale of the year is here. Save up to 70% on daily tickets, 2025 season passes, and more. With a season pass, you can visit for the rest of 2024 and all of 2025 with access to select events including Oktoberfest, Kids Boo Fest, and Holiday in the Park. Plus, get thrilling perks and discounts throughout the park. But don't wait, our biggest sale of the year ends Labor Day. Visit sixflags.com to buy now.
Hello and welcome back to Chasing Excellence, a podcast about chasing what truly matters. My name is Patrick Cummings. Thank you so very much for joining us this time around. We've got something special for you, something that I hope you're going to really like. We have a conversation that I had recently with a friend of the show, Jamison Price. You might recognize Jamison's voice. We've done something similar to this before. We have a conversation that he and I had as part of an ongoing series of conversations that we're having inside of the Chase Club. The Chase Club is our premium membership. You can learn more at chasingexcellence.email. He and I have been talking about and talking through the process and systems he is building as he develops inside of his gym, CrossFit Elysium, what he calls the 5 factors coaching method. We will not get too much into that this time around. Just know that he's been working on this for years now, something that he's been thinking about and working on for a while as he works with clients there in the gym to develop and strengthen their 5 factors of health. Jamison, like I mentioned, owns CrossFit Elysium in Tennessee. He also, and how I've gotten to know him better over the last number of months he's the head of ops at ComTrain. And he is, of course, as you can probably guess, a longtime listener of Chasing Excellence. So he's a wonderful dude, a good guy to have on the team. And I'm really excited to continue these conversations with him. This conversation that we're going to dive into is one we had about a questionnaire that he has put together, 15 questions that he gives folks as they start the 5 factors coaching process with him and with their coaches there at the gym. 15 questions to just get a sense of where they are across each of the 5 factors of health. If you happen to be new here, those 5 factors: how we move, eat, think, connect, and recover. So what we do in this conversation, we break down each one of those questions across the 5 factors, get a sense of why he chose these. And as you'll hear in this conversation, these are very much a work in progress. These are where he's landed today. But as we talk about at the end of the conversation, we'd love to get some feedback. And actually, right after we initially released this conversation inside of the Chase Club a month or two back, Ben sent me a list of more questions for us to consider putting inside of this questionnaire. And so this is very much for us a work in progress. And I'm excited to figure out what we ultimately do with it as we get some more reps in it and with it, and as we get some feedback from folks just like you. So here's my idea. Here's my one little ask, because I've wanted to mention this before. chasingexcellence.email. If you haven't checked that out yet, one of the things that we do there, we can do there, that we haven't quite utilized yet, is the chat feature. We use a platform called Substack. You can download the Substack app, search for Chasing Excellence in it. And once you do, and once you subscribe, you will have the option to jump into the chat. You can start chats, you can respond to chats, we can use it like a chat thing. You know what to do with chats, right? It's open to everybody. You can use it whether or not you're inside the Chase Club. So I would love, if you've got thoughts on this episode, I would love to use this episode as an excuse, as a catalyst for folks. If you're just listening, you want to join in on the conversation in some way, shape, or form, you don't want to jump into the Chase Club for whatever reason, that's totally cool. Join us in the chat. Let us know what's going on. Ask questions there. Send links there. Hey, I read this. I like this. I watched this. I don't know. Maybe we can make it something where we can collectively connect with each other. I think that would be wonderful. So again, chasingexcellence.email. Download the Substack app. Join us there, jump into the chat. Let us know what you think about this questionnaire. Let us know if we're missing something or we should add something, or your thoughts on the specifics of this questionnaire. Okay, without any further ado, here's Jamison and I talking about our working questionnaire for the 5 factors of health. First place we're going to start is the Sickness-Wellness-Fitness Continuum. It's something that Ben and I talk about often. It's something that we stole from CrossFit, something that CrossFit has done really well, which is to articulate this continuum. And I'm just going to start with a quote, and then I'd love your thoughts on the continuum, why it's important, how you've used it yourself. This is from Greg Glassman. He was co-founder of CrossFit. He said, "Our assumption is that if everything we can measure about health will conform to this continuum, then it seems that sickness, wellness, and fitness are different measures of a single quality, health. And on that continuum, all the way to the left is sick, in the middle is well, and all the way to the right is fit." So why do we start? Why do you work with the continuum in this 5 factors coaching method?
Yeah, the continuum is definitely the right place to begin the conversation. Like you said, it's for sure CrossFit Greg Glassman IP, but we have taken it and expanded it to include other elements and aspects that we think are required and necessary to measure true health. And so the way that aligns with the conversation around the 5 factors is this recognition that if you're truly measuring health across a continuum, that you cannot just measure health in physical biomarkers or even physical performance markers and nutritional markers, which really end up being the same thing anyways. And so I actually have, which I'll send you this as well if you want to drop it into the Substack, a pretty short blog post I wrote really particularly for our 5-factor clients in the gym regarding the continuum method, not as it relates just to the Sick, Well, Fit continuum from CrossFit, but just this kind of ethos that you can really address everything in life on a continuum. And the reason that that's useful is because of the barriered concept of the Sick, Well, Fit continuum. So that's where I find the value in it. Is it's this idea of not just like leveling up, it's the notion and the idea of creating obstacles, friction, and barriers to things you can't control by wildly investing into the things you can control. Most likely in the human experience, every couple of years, you end up with some sort of life event that gets in the way of your typical rhythms and routines of health, regardless of what we're measuring health by. Something happens, and whether it's like loss or grief or trauma or some sort of general acute sickness that maybe has long-lasting effects, or I don't know, maybe like a global pandemic, things along those lines. Sometimes stuff just happens, and that seems to ebb and flow or cycle through the human experience every couple of years, maybe longer, maybe more often for some and not as often for others. But the idea here is, in the times that is ebbing and not flowing in terms of difficulties and obstacles, we want to be making deposits and investments into our health so that when that time comes and things you can't control happen, you have created that hedge or that barrier between yourself and essentially bottoming out. So like you said, like the far left is sick, the upper middle is well, and then the far right is fit. And if we're far right, then when that uncontrollable thing happens, we're just going to trend more towards the well, or maybe in between well and fit. But if we're hanging out on the left side and that uncontrollable thing occurs, it's really, really likely that in some aspect of health, we're going to bottom out. So we lose the opportunity to train. We lose the opportunity to like dial in nutrition. We don't sleep a lot. It doesn't have to be negative things. Like it can literally be you have a kid. I know that drastically affects sleep, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that very much happened to me, moving from the fit to the well for the first couple of years of having kids. But to your point, like it is the reason why you want to live in fitness, because when those things happen, you can comfortably live in well for forever. Most people don't, quite frankly, right? But if we can live there, we can stay there when those uncontrollables, or whether they're good or bad, we can then say, got it. Now I'm sort of past that. I can put my foot back on the gas and start moving again towards fit.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe this is just a personal experience as well. End of 2023, beginning of 2024, there was a little bit of that life event for me. Again, not all negative things, some negative things, like with family members in the hospital, having surgeries, things like that really threw off the schedule. But then also some positive things of like just career opportunities to invest into more things like this, which pulled my time away from being more dialed with fitness, health habits and such. And one of the things that I like with different like autoimmune issues and stuff that I have, one of the things that like the biomarkers that were negatively impacted by that uncontrollable life event was literally my blood pressure. Now, probably because of just like stress and lack of sleep and stuff. But my blood pressure, whereas it used to be like low hundreds and mid 60s, is now normal. But it shouldn't be normal for me based off of like life practices and stuff. And so it's frustrating because I saw that decline to the, the 125 over, 77 or 80 or whatever. But I say that to say that I had somebody ask me if I got frustrated about the fact that I deal with autoimmune issues or things like that because I'm so invested into health. And my initial response is like, no, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because imagine how much worse it would be if I didn't. It wouldn't be well. It would be sick and debilitating. And I have complete and total functional ability because of the investments made to try to get to the far right. So yeah, I think to that point, like I have a lot of personal experience. And again, the point is not to win at health. It is to create barriers to the limitations of sickness. And so I think the continuum is such a powerful concept in that way. And then to what you want to talk about today, it's just worth measuring across all aspects, not just physical biomarkers or physical athletic performance markers. So that's like the 5-factor method is essentially borrowing the continuum IP from CrossFit and going, it's more than training and it's more than nutrition. Obviously, we're measuring it across 5 things: eat, sleep, train, think, connect. If we really value all 5 of those things and think that health is measured by not a balance of all 5, but a harmony of all 5. I hate the word balance now. I think maybe just because it's overused, it annoys me. But I also don't agree with it in a lot of ways, because you don't want to sacrifice some things to gain others whenever that's not the actual appropriate method. So it's really more about like a harmony between all 5. Like how do all 5 exist together?
Yeah, I like that. I like that too. I hadn't thought about that. We use balance all the time, but I like the idea of harmony because it implies that there will be times when, when you hear balance, you think, okay, even. But there will be times when, you know what, I just really need to put more emphasis on connection, right, in the conversation we're going to have. Even maybe at the sacrifice of, I don't know, sleep, right? Maybe I go out once a week with friends instead of go to bed at 8 o'clock like an old person, right? And so it's not balance. And I like the idea of harmony because it's just like, how do these things interplay with each other in such a way that it moves me collectively, kind of interdependently towards where I'm trying to get to? Not balance for the sake of balance, not everybody gets an even score because I'm aiming for balance, but no, where do I need a little bit more emphasis? Where do I need a little bit less emphasis? Where can I give up on one so that I can give into another? Yeah. Right? So I like that. I like the idea of harmony over balance.
That's definitely the way to articulate that the right way. It's not even across all, because that doesn't make sense in terms of the natural flows of life. And I think gets into the conversation we want to have today is because it is the continuum, and a continuum is measurable. Then if the goal is essentially a total health score, you can have kind of a harmony of a higher score in one and a lower score in another, and it bring up the total. And I think that's where there is value. And as we get into this, what's really interesting is I've had some people that I know very, very well test and take this. And if I just were to assess when they get to their final score, I would be like, yeah, that's what I would have assumed that across all 5 factors. And so, again, as we go through this, it's definitely not done and it's definitely not perfect. As I was looking through it just to have this call, there are things I would already change probably, even in just some of the questions that are asked. But it is interesting because I intentionally had some people who I know to be very, very relationally intentional and relationally healthy and like spiritually aware, but didn't work out, take this. And because they don't exercise, they're not lazy or sedentary, they just don't intentionally exercise. But because they don't exercise and because they don't actually dial in nutrition and eat whole foods, they cannot score beyond well on this continuum, even though they score like out the roof on being super fulfilled relationally and in the connect factor and in like the think factor, like healthy mindsets, growth mindsets. So that was kind of the point. It's, you can't get away with it. You can bring up the total score for sure by like having some high scores in some and maybe some lower scores in others, but you can't get away with neglecting any single one of them and still scoring fit. Like it just doesn't work. So that's been really cool to test this and see that happen.
Love that. Okay, let's jump into this. Again, we've got, for each of the 5 factors, you've got 3, what do we want to call these? 3 things to measure, 3 metrics. And in each one of those 3 things, with each one of those things, we give ourselves a score of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to do eat first. So here are the 3 measurements, the 3 metrics. Scores. First is foods. Score yourself a 1 with ultra processed foods, a 3 for processed foods, a 5 for clean and whole foods. The second metric, 1, quantity severely over or under output levels. 3, quantity moderately over or under output levels, and 5, quantity supports output levels. The last and the third, less than 3 days per week of controlled quantity and quality. Get yourself a 1 if you're there. Give yourself a 3 if you are 3 days per week of controlled quantity and quality, and give yourself a 5 if you're 5+ days per week of controlled quality or quantity. And again, if you're somewhere in between there, you give yourself a 2 or 4 as it may happen. High level thoughts on why these 3, what you've learned from these 3, what we can think about as we're kind of giving ourselves a score across those 3 different metrics. Yeah.
So for EAT, again, this is where the value of this being coached comes into play, because it does require some like intuitive understanding and also some non-intuitive, just basic objective understandings of what processed versus non-processed foods are. So I don't think you could just give this to somebody and be like, score yourself. It does need to be guided through with a coach who understands these things. And so the reason for these 3 questions was this essentially covers quantity, quality, and frequency. So quality regarding the process nature of things, quantity, which is from Fitness in 100 Words, which is essentially eat to support your energy expenditure. Do not be at a caloric surplus at the end of the day. And so that kind of supports a lot of stuff, which is you're overweight because you are at a caloric surplus. Regardless of your macros, you are across a 7-day period, you're at a caloric surplus. And so that's like the idea of, hey, it's not really that complicated. Let's evaluate your output level. And then are you severely over or under that? Because a lot of people are also under it. I think like traditionally we think that everybody just overeats, but there are quite a few people who also undereat and assume that that's not going to create an issue or that that's like the way forward. So I think that's where the value was in both over and under. And then the last one being a frequency thing of just, we got to ask, like, if you answered 5 for you eat clean and whole foods and you eat to support your energy levels, do you do it every day? Because if you only do it one day, then it doesn't really matter. So those are the reasons for that. And so the way that it would work is you would score yourself on that. And let's say you eat processed foods, which processed foods would be anything a human being touches. So it's going to be really, really hard to score a 5 on that. I think healthy would be like a 3 or a 4, honestly.
Agreed.
Whereas ultra processed would be like everything comes through the window of your car. Yeah, or comes from boxes on shelves that have no shelf life or shelf date, or have an endless shelf life, I guess. And so that's going to be really hard to score a 5 on that. So let's just say you got a 3 because you eat processed foods, because human beings touch the food that you eat, and it's not direct from like ground to mouth. And then let's just say you score a 5 in the other 2, then your score on that would be 13. So you got a possible 13 out of 15 health points, if you will, on that part of the continuum with EAT. So essentially we have 5 of these. There are 15 available points for each factor. So you could score, if you got a perfect score, a health score of 75, a 5-factor continuum score of 75. So we're 1 in and you've scored 13 because you did a 3, a 5, and a 5.
Got it. Cool. Let's move into the next one, which is the sleep. Let's go with, first metric, in bed less than 6 hours gives yourself a 1. In bed 7 to 8 hours gives yourself a 3. and in bed 9+ hours, give yourself a 5. I like how hard you're scoring these, because like most people are like 7-8 hours, like I'm winning, but you're like, no, 9+ hours in bed. I love that. The second metric, 1+ hour variance in sleep and wake times. Give yourself a 3 if you got 30 minutes of variance in sleep and wake times, and give yourself a 5 if you're less than 10 minutes variance in sleep and wake times. Of course, that means when you go to bed and when you wake up, the variance inside of those two things. And then the last metric is give yourself a 1 if you've got very disrupted sleep. Number 3, or score yourself a 3 if you've got somewhat disrupted sleep, and give yourself a 5 if you sleep through the night. Thoughts on these? Why these?
I really like the first two. The third one is, like I said, that's one that I'm like, I don't know about it. The first two, I think, like you said, are aggressive, but what's the point in not being aggressive, I guess, if we're really trying to measure this stuff? Because not only is the amount of time aggressive, but it also says in bed, not asleep. Because traditionally we know that you're probably going to sleep an hour less than you're in bed. So really in bed less than 6 hours is you're sleeping 5 or fewer hours. You're actually asleep 5 or fewer hours. In bed 7 to 8 hours, you are probably sleeping 6 hours to maybe 7 hours. And then the 9+ hours is because that's actually going to get you the necessary 7 to 8 hours of sleep that you actually need. So they are aggressive. And there is a reason it says in bed and not asleep. I also really like the second one for reasons even other than sleep. I think just for the overall rhythms and routines of somebody's life, it's just really, really healthy to have that. And so we know that there is a sleep science to support that sleep and wake time variance is a really key component to holistic, healthy sleep habits. Typically you want it to not be more than 45 minutes. So the time you go to bed doesn't vary by more than 45 minutes. The time you wake up doesn't vary by 45 minutes. And a lot of that has to do with circadian rhythm and things along those lines. But that really lends towards sleep quality. But I also think it lends towards just better lifestyle quality in general, because you're built around that rhythm. So I really like that one too. The less than 10 minutes is hard to do if you've ever done that. Like everything has to go perfectly for that to be the case. And then sometimes you also just don't fall asleep. So the 5 is really hard on both of those. The last one I think is hard. I don't love the last one yet because I think it's just harder to measure. Do you wake up a bunch throughout the night?
Yeah.
Or do you sleep soundly through the night? I think it matters because again, that helps us understand how much you're actually sleeping. And then it would help us maybe make some different informed decisions around, okay, maybe because of your lifestyle, do we need to talk about holistic supplements? Because we're not big supplement people outside of the things that are like, okay, some things that would maybe help you experience less disruption in your sleep. Let's try it. Let's talk about the CBD. Let's talk about the magnesium, things along those lines. Again, because obviously the less disrupted your sleep, the more hours you're actually sleeping. But I think it affects the mentality and think factor, because for people who wake up a lot during the night, they dread going to sleep. It's not a good experience. And so I think it's worth measuring, but I would be open to even like the consideration of a better way to measure that.
I like it in some ways, the disrupted sleep, even if it's harder to measure, because there's also some, if you have a really disrupted sleep, it's possible that it's because you're not making some decisions that if you made them, your sleep would be less disrupted. And what I'm thinking about is, does the dog sleep in the bed with you? Does the dog have to? No, of course not. Right? And do your kids come in often to interrupt you?
Sure.
Are you waking up to go pee? Like there are things you can do, not if there's some, there's lots of things that could disrupt that sleep, but if there are some things that you could actually change, you're just not willing to, or you haven't figured out how to, silly example, but if you live in the city like I used to, does traffic wake you up at 3:00 in the morning because it drives past your apartment building? Okay, well, could you get a sound machine, right? Could you get a white noise machine and decrease the chances of that traffic waking you up? All of these things. And so if you do have again, if there are things that you might not be able to fix with behavioral changes or like environment changes, but a lot of times there is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the whole chasing excellence ethos is like, let's be really aggressive about what you have control over. And that's way more than you think. And so you can make the argument even of like, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but if your environment is keeping you awake at night because of the street noise, like maybe you should move. And
Right.
that's obviously pretty aggressive, but if it's affecting your actual health, it's worth talking about. Let's put everything on the table. So I think you're right. Even just the idea of, are there things you're doing that are creating that very disruptive sleep? You know, when is the last time you had caffeine? And again, that's where the coachability comes into play here of like, why I definitely don't. I think that question particularly is a reason you can't just hand this to somebody and let them score themselves. I think, again, that reinforces the necessity for the coach. Also, that's what coaching is. It's okay, then how do we move from a 1 to a 3? Because that could take us a while and be a lot of really hard choices. But like you said, yeah, I really like that, just because it's okay, well, how does this put the things in our control that we just assume aren't in our control? You know, and then what kind of things did we just never think about? Because so the last, I mean, it's been over a week now. We did the Syndicate Crown semifinal. We worked it in Knoxville, and it just wrecked me. Like, I crashed hard after. Ended up getting sick. And when I'm sick, I don't want to sleep in the bed, as I don't want to keep Leslie awake if I'm like moving around a lot or get her sick. So I've been sleeping in the guest room, and the last 3 nights, I've just been sleeping in the guest room because we've both been sleeping better because we're not sleeping in the same bed. And it's, we've never really thought about this before, but I sleep better alone. So, yeah, Leslie's, I've been thinking maybe we should just do this permanently, because like, I don't wake up in the middle of the night, like burning up. I just sleep through the night. I'm like, yeah. It's worth thinking about. So it's like the stuff that you never really think about is worth thinking about. Yeah.
That's very funny.
Good times.
That's very funny.
So yeah, you would score here. And you're probably not getting a 5 in any of these.
Yep.
So it's tough.
Yep. So you'd be, if you scored between 7 and 10, you'd be in that well category, and then to the right and left of that would put you in or closer to either the sick or the fit category. Yep. Let's jump into the train factor. Our 3 metrics. First one, score yourself a 1, painful and limited range of motion. Score yourself a 3 if you've got pain-free limited range of motion, and score yourself 5 if you've got pain-free full range of motion. Second metric, score yourself a 1 if you get less than 5,000 steps a day. Score yourself a 3 if you get 5,000 steps a day. Score yourself a 5 if you get 10,000 plus steps per day. And then the last metric, score yourself a 1 if you've got no CrossFit style training, a 3 if you've got CrossFit style training 3 to 4 times a week, and a 5 if you've got CrossFit style training 5+ days a week.
Yeah, so there's a note at the bottom.
I like the steps in there. I know people have steps don't matter, and maybe they do matter. Maybe the only thing I like in the mix here of your metrics, including that, because there's, we did I forgot what the number was, but we did a 30-day challenge at some point, and it was like to get a good amount of steps over the course of a month. And man, when you do that, you realize I spend a lot of time not moving.
Yes, dude. Yeah, I have been working on our onboarding, really cleaning up our onboarding process at the gym. And the role with Comp Train Gym helps that as well, just because what we're building for all of our Comp Train gyms to try to build first and test and vet inside of Elysium. And so we're like taking our programming and training principles and trying to bake them into our onboarding process. And the first thing that I want to say in terms of the kind of pyramid or hierarchy of movement or of fitness training specifically is just sit less, move more. Like before anything else, like the hierarchy of training styles, like the first one is just sit less, move more. Because like you said, once you start assessing it, it's almost worse than nutrition. It's like when you tell somebody to drink enough water, they're like, yeah, I drink plenty of water. And you're like, okay, just evaluate it. And then at the end of the day, they're like, I drink 17 ounces of water today. And it's shocking. And steps are similar. And people think that they're moving. And whenever you're like, to be honest with you, I don't think this one is aggressive enough.
I could see that being more aggressive.
Like I would probably want to put 10,000 at 3 and 15,000 at 5. Because I feel like 10,000 is honestly bare minimum necessity. So like I would probably change that one but unfortunately, this does make it more accessible, because if you were to measure it, most people are less than 5. So most people are definitely a 1 and don't even really deserve to be a 1 on this continuum. So I do think it can be more aggressive. I think for most people, it's actionable. It provides something more actionable and reasonable to go, hey, this is one we can score a 5 in, and I need you to score a 5 in it. So and then for the first part, which is the range of motion thing, there's a note at the bottom that does speak a little bit to the range of motion, which is the ability to lift your hands all the way over your head with locked out arms and squat until your hips are all the way to your ankles while your heels are planted on the ground. I am not a 5. Like, not because of pain, I just don't have the range of motion to do that. More likely to do it with a barbell over my head than unweighted, because I don't have the mobility to do it. Yep. So again, that one is really aggressive. Toddlers do that. And then you lose it at some point and hardly ever get it back.
Toddlers and Olympic weightlifters. That's where
correct.
the two populations. Yes.
So that one's also really tough to where but also is a kind of arbitrary in that I would have to watch you do it to be like, okay, that's a 3, versus the pain thing is, well, then we're a 1. If just raising your arms over your head hurts, okay, we're at a 1. If squatting hurts, we're at a 1. If it's pain-free though and limited, it's the limited versus not limited thing that would require a coach's eye to look at and be like, ooh, not good, versus, yeah, you're in good shape. But then at that point, you may be in good shape because you have 0 muscle mass and you're hypermobile. And so there are other problems here that we want to address. So again, where the coachability comes in. And then the last one, again, CrossFit style, constantly varied, high intensity functional movements. CrossFit style for me, as we assess this for people, also requires resistance training. You've got to strength train. You've got to do resistance training. So, I mean, obviously I'm biased for Comp Train Gym, the gym principles of our gym programming principles, where that's what I mean whenever I say CrossFit style training. It's you're doing resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. You're moving heavy stuff. You're breathing really heavy 2 to 3 times a week. You're working in the aerobic zones in zone 2. We're checking all the boxes of a really, really well balanced, consistent CrossFit style routine. So that's what I mean by that one. Again, not something somebody would just intuitively understand on their own.
Yep. And again, you score yourself across all 3 of those. If you score a 7 to 10, you're in the well category. And again, to the left and the right, higher or lower of that score moves you towards the sick and the fit end of the continuum. Jamison and I will be back in just 2 minutes. We just want to say thanks to a few sponsors. We're brought to you this time around by Shopify. Let's talk shop. Specifically, let's talk Shopify. If you've been living under a rock for the last couple decades and don't know what Shopify is, head to shopify.com/excellence to learn all about the global commerce platform that's been an absolute game changer to businesses big and small for many years. Whether you're just launching your online shop or celebrating your millionth order, Shopify has got you covered every step of the way. And now with Shopify Collective, you can even curate products from the brands you love that are also utilizing Shopify's tools, apps, and payment processing, giving your customers more variety and your business more sales with less effort. It's like having a magic wand for your business. With Shopify, running a business is a breeze, or at least as breezy as running a business is, which if you run a business, you know it's only mildly breezy. However, they do make getting paid simple by instantly accepting every type of payment, and their single dashboard lets you manage orders, shipping, and payments from anywhere. Don't forget to visit shopify.com/excellence to sign up for a $1 per month trial period and grow your business no matter what stage you are in. That's shopify.com/excellence. We are also brought to you this time around by Qualia Senolytic. Have you heard about senolytics yet? These ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago are being hailed as a major breakthrough for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. That's why we love Qualia Senolytic here. You can learn more by visiting qualialife.com/excellence. That's QUALIA qualialife.com/excellence for more than 50% off, and use code excellence at checkout for an additional 15% off. I'm not good at maths, but 50% plus 15%, that's something. As we age, our bodies accumulate senescent cells, also known as zombie cells. These cells don't serve a useful function anymore and can cause symptoms of aging like aches, slow workout recoveries, and sluggish energy. Qualia Senolytic helps eliminate these old cells, much like pruning dead leaves off a plant, allowing the rest of your cells to thrive. What is amazing is you only need to take it 2 days a month, plus the formula is non-GMO, vegan, and gluten-free, and comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee. So you can resist aging at the cellular level and try Qualia Senolytic today. Visit qualialife.com/excellence for that 50% off. And if you use the code excellence, you'll get an additional 15% off at checkout. QUALIA life.com/excellence. You can also, if you don't have the internet, well, one, I don't know how you're listening to this, but if you don't, it's also available at select GNC locations near you. qualialife.com/excellence. All right, let's jump back into my conversation with Jamison. Think category is next. Here are our 3 metrics. First one, score yourself a 1 if you've got a pessimistic mindset where everything sucks. Score yourself a 3 if you're a realist mindset, it is what it is. And score yourself a 5 if you've got a challenger mindset, everything is an opportunity to grow. Second metric, score yourself a 1 if you're living without purpose. Score yourself a 3 if you're living with some idea of purpose, and a 5 if you're living with a clear purpose. And then the third metric, score yourself a 1 if you're emotionally miserable, a 3 if you're emotionally stable, and a 5 if you're emotionally thriving. Those are cool.
So much harder to measure, but this is where we landed.
Yeah.
I think the first one's good. I like the first one a lot. And I think it's pretty easy to be like, do you have the pessimistic or the victim mindset where like everything sucks and everything happens to you and you're not in control of anything and the world is out to get you and like you are the main character of the world's story, but somehow the whole world hates you as the main character. That's the idea. The realist mindset, I think, is the appropriately balanced of, it is what it is. I'll stay in my lane. I'll deal with it, things as they come. But then the challenger or competitor mindset is everything, love everything. It's a very stoic concept too, of the amor fati idea of loving fate, loving everything that happens. You can spend forever in just that conversation with people. So I like that one. What are your thoughts on the second two as you read those?
I like this. Well, with the second one, living without or living with some, living with a clear purpose. I think that's interesting. Thinking about it from the coaching perspective or from the coaching relationship perspective, like you can tell pretty quickly, I imagine, if you were to ask somebody, are you living with purpose or you're living with a clear purpose? That if you are. And if it's not, it's like the question of like, how's your diet? Like, oh, it's pretty good. Are you living with purpose? Yeah, kind of. I kind of have a sense of why I'm here. Versus the people who are like, yep, it's dialed in. I do this, and this. I know where I am. Yeah. And it's the same with purpose. Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing here and why. Right. And so I think that's an interesting. There's a mile deep to go if you aren't yet to the place where you're like, yep, I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm here. There's a mile to go to figure that out, to move from the 1 to the 4 and into the 5. Yeah. But just that immediate question of being able to ask somebody and just see on their face and their response, I imagine gives you a ton of clarity over, oh, you've never actually thought about this. Or, oh, okay, this is not an issue for you. You're dialed in here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like you said, like we've had this conversation, I guess, in our first or second episode talking about this stuff, which is, that's where we start. I guess technically this is where we start. They do take this the first session. But then our initial coaching begins with this idea of living without, living with some, living with clear purpose, which is where the 5 pillars come in. The whole concept of purpose is really wrapped up in that package of purpose, priorities, principles, perspective, perseverance. And that's really where we begin the coaching journey, which is, start with why, begin with the end in mind. Because again, the answer to that question is really where we draw motivation or where we draw perspective as we coach people through all these other aspects of like, it's when we got to keep pointing back to that thing. Like the language we use, we talked about this in the other episode, is the rum line. This is the direction we're sailing. This is the end state of our voyage. So when you start shifting one way or the other, or like breaking the sails down and not moving, or throwing the anchor down places you shouldn't be, like we want to point to the rum line, to the end state. So that way, that's like really where the discipline and the motivation comes from, to dial in the rest of these and move the rest of these from a 1 to a 5. Yeah. So I agree. I think it's cool because this is what makes this a years long potential coaching process, is because it's, oh, well, a 1 in one of these areas opens up the door to a very particular and specific curriculum. Okay, for the next 3 months, that's what we're spending time on. And it kind of makes this an endless coaching opportunity for people.
Mm-hmm. And as it relates to the third one, what I think about there, and I don't think it's bad, but what I think about there is something that Ben and I talk about a lot that I think is really valuable. And I haven't quite figured out maybe the right way to track this or measure this, but there's something really interesting in the frequency at which you get knocked off center, the frequency at which you get triggered into being pulled away from the present, from a stable mindset. How often do you get ripped out of the calm, cool, and collected mindset and knocked somewhere else? And then how long does it take you to get back to normal? And again, that's harder to figure out how to track this on 1 to 5. But to me, it's like a 1 would be easily and often triggered, might not be the right word, but we'll go with it for now. 5 would be never, never, like nothing outside of me knocks me off center.
Yeah.
And again, if 5 it should be a stretch. I don't know anybody who's not triggered by something, right? So maybe the never is too much of a stretch, but you get my point. Is like, there's something in there that is a really good metric for us individually to figure out, is how often do we get so bothered that we lose sight of where we are right now.
No, I love that. Yeah, this is definitely one that sticks out to me, is like, this could be changed, because it is so subjective. And
yes.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, which is the concept of stability, that's really the word in this that I like, is the stability concept. Yeah. And I don't know if that has to do with, I love the idea of living in the present. You are wildly engaged with the thing that's right in front of you. You're not living in the past. You're not living in the future. You're not controlled by the past. You're not controlled by the future, which has components of like fear and anxiety to it. Yeah, I don't know how to, that would be one to workshop for sure. So if you could fix that one, that'd be great. So you just let me know when you come up with it.
Leave us a comment on this, folks. Let us know how we can tweak that. Sure. I do like that. It's something that Ben and I talk about, which is like focus, flow, focus versus distracted state. It's really kind of that. It's like, how often are you distracted and how often are you focused? And figuring out the frequency at which you get pulled into a distracted state, and the frequency at which you can stay in a focused state. That's really cool. And I think that's a really good indicator of this, or inside of this bucket.
My initial thought on that is 1 would be often rattled, and then 3 would be like mostly stable, and 5 would be always stable. It's just like that idea. Or like often rattled, rarely rattled, never rattled. And like the definition of rattled is exactly what you're saying. I think that's right.
That's really cool. And again, worth saying 16 times, like the value and the beauty of the coaching relationship is, what does it mean to be rattled? Let's actually talk about how often you are rattled, how often your kid does something and you blow up at them, how often you get angry in traffic, how often the line at the grocery store is long and suddenly you're pissed off about it. Like really figuring that out and getting honest with ourselves about how often we get rattled, I think needs to be pulled out of us, because it can be so automatic that we don't recognize it. We don't realize it until it is put on the table and said, like, that thing, how often does that happen?
Yeah.
So dig that. Okay. So those 3 metrics, if you score in the 7 to 10, you're in that well category. A little bit more, a little bit less, put you in the sick and fit category. Last one we've got is the connect bucket. First of the 3 metrics, number 1, score yourself a 1 if you've got shallow relationships, a 3 if you've got neutral relationships, and a 5 if you've got meaningful relationships. Second metric, score yourself a 1 if you've got no awareness of spirituality, a 3 if you're spiritually aware, and a 5 if you're spiritually motivated. And the third and last metric is score yourself a 1 if you've got no passion or love for the work that you do. Score yourself a 3 if you've got some passion or love for the work you do. And a 5 if you're extremely fulfilled by the work you do. Those are some interesting choices in there.
This is the hardest one, man. Like,
yeah,
human to human, horizontal relationships is easy. Like, that one is simple. It's like, you got friends or not? Do you like people or don't you?
If you're in trouble, do you have 2 people you can call?
Yes. Yeah. So the first one, I think, is, that's meaningful, is how we would measure it that way. Exactly. What do we mean by meaningful? Well, you feel success when this other person succeeds, and you feel pain when this other person feels pain, and you want to share your success and pain with these other people, and they want to share it with you, having that conversation. I think that one is easy. The second and third one is harder, because this is where we're talking about your connection with, for lack of better terms, the universe, and then connection to the way in which you make the world better. And so it's like, the way that I designed these 3 was like, you're connecting horizontally with the people in the world. You are connecting vertically with something that is like beyond the physical world. And then you are doing with your time, energy, and effort something that makes that horizontal world better. So you're connecting better while you're here. You're leaving here better than you found it. And you're connected to something bigger than here. So I have a note down at Spirituality, which says that these questions are not intended to consider religious backgrounds or preferences. Consider these questions in regards to spiritual enlightenment that recognizes we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so I think it depends on where even you live in our country, whether it's like Southeast kind of Christian Bible Belt versus post-Christian in the Northwest and things along those lines, where both of those places are hyper spiritual in very, very different ways. To a detriment, I would say, because they are so obsessed about practicing a specific program rather than connecting with the reality of, hey, human beings are spiritual creations having human experiences. So it's a soul or a spirit embodied into a human body. So I would put a 5 on that for me, but as the coach, it's not my job. Do I think that if everybody believed what I believed and was motivated by what I was motivated by and understood it the way I understood it and had the experience the way I have experienced it, do I think that if everybody aligned with that their life would be better? Yeah, I think that. The same way that I think that if everybody did CrossFit, they'd be healthier.
Right. Exactly what I thought.
Right. So I for sure think that. Why would I not think that? Why is it even worth thinking if I didn't think that? So like, do I think that I'm right? For sure. Otherwise, why would I think it? But at the same time, it is not my job to make you believe what I believe, because then you don't even believe it yourself. You just believe what I believe, and there's no use in that. And so in the coaching relationship, it's really just trying to open people up to go, hey, there are some aspects and there's some elements here to the manifestation and the embodiment of human health and physical health. There are some aspects here that like are going to be a little bit beyond your understanding, and they're going to transcend that a little bit. And there's some things here that you're maybe not going to fully comprehend, that like when you get out and connect in the world, you're going to find that it's really the component that makes all the other health worth it. And I think the people part of this is the most important, because what is the point to being healthy if you are not healthy to have healthier connections and relationships? So, Ben and I actually had this conversation a little bit, because while Ben and I align in so many ways on lots of things, when it comes to the function of spirituality or the function of faith, like it's not the same for he and I. We wouldn't articulate it the same way or put the same words to it, but kind of landed on there's still value in putting these in there, because this concept of being a part of something bigger, being surrendered to something bigger and beyond yourself is really, really necessary for having this humble perspective of going, I'm not the main character of the story. Like I do get the benefit and the privilege of being a part of the bigger story. And that's like way cooler, because the pressure's off. I get to do extremely fulfilling work but the world's existence does not depend on my execution or perfect execution of that extremely fulfilling work, because I'm connected to something way, way bigger than myself. So yeah, I think it has value, just if nothing more, just to get the wheels spinning for people.
Agreed. Yeah. I think a couple of things. One, I think there is probably some real transference between, sticking on this kind of spirituality or spiritually aware metric and the living with a purpose one. Like, I imagine for people who score high on one, it's likely that they score high on the other, right? There's lots of interplay between those things. So one, that's sort of just an interesting interdependence or relationship between them. And then the other thing I was thinking about is, what you're talking about with spiritually motivated is really this sort of like bigger picture communal mindset. And what I started thinking about is like, a lot of people could replace and again, we could have a whole, obviously lots of people have conversations about this that go much, much deeper, but it's really, on some level, it's really about the community in which you are a part. Right. And so there's also could be an element of, do you have a few meaningful relationships? Are you an active member of a community that you feel like is making you better, that you're helping make better, that is making the world better? Something inside of there. Because it's not really enough to just have one or two. I mean, it's great, have one or two close relationships, or 5, you got kids, all those things. But if you're just in a silo and it's just you and 3 people, and it's not, you're not part of something bigger, then it's really easy to forget that you are in fact part of something much, much bigger.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right direction to take that thought process, because there's a camaraderie. That's like the word I would use. There's camaraderie in it, where it's like, hey, let's just use the CrossFit space. Like, most of the time, people who go to things like semifinals events or CrossFit L1s, CrossFit L2s, CrossFit affiliate gatherings, the CrossFit Games, you're gathered in that room with like-minded individuals. You're not going to develop meaningful, quote unquote, meaningful relationships with those people in which they know all the intimate details of your life, but you feel a camaraderie of, I am in a room with like-minded people who there are likely some pretty significant variances in the way that we operate and in the way we think about some things. But as a unit, we are all set on this in this same direction. And I think whenever you think about spirituality and religion specifically, that is the experience that you gain from that, is this like sense of alignment. The reason that I think that I use the word spiritually motivated and not just aware is because, again, this is a conversation for another time, but like, as a Christian, sometimes I don't really know how to categorize myself, because the way that most people perceive, at least traditionally, like traditional Christians or traditional evangelical individuals in our society, is definitely not the way that I do it, like in a traditional sense. So it's, I kind of align with that group of people, but like you're saying, it's like almost a subcategory of a larger category in which I find the people I align with. And that means that alignment comes way less from what you say you believe and the ways that you are motivated to practice what you believe. And so I think that's where the value comes from. So like you said, they should be wildly connected. Your sense of purpose and your spiritual motivation should be super connected. The thing that Christians and like our faith, if you will, or religion, if you will, is really bad at, that most others are really good at, is the embodied practices of their religious beliefs. So if you read the Bhagavad Gita, if you read Hindu scripture, Buddhist scripture, they're very, very principled in terms of the motivation for living. The way that they live is very, very principled. And those principles are motivated by their beliefs. Those principles are motivated by their faith. If you read those, it's, well, this is what we do, this is how we act. And you can take that to the far extreme, where you have extremism in all religions, and that's kind of the problem, where everything is about dialed in specific behavior modification. And that's also not the point. But the point is to like live a principled based life. And those principles come from this larger understanding of the fact that it's not about you. And that's the common thread across most religions and most spiritual awareness is, it's not about you, dude. So you live a principled life in which it's about other people, which then leads us to the third question of this continuum, which is like, you should be doing work that you're fulfilled by because that work is about making the world a better place based on the principled life that you live because of your motivation and awareness spiritually. So again, that's why I would be like, I am that, but also like my favorite word to use regarding spirituality is embodiment, because we are spiritual beings in a human body having a human experience. And our spiritual awareness doesn't matter until it impacts what we do inside of our human body in a human world along with other human beings. And it doesn't just get to stop with theology or theory. And so I want to push way, way back on spiritual awareness is so different than theology. Spiritual awareness is so different than dying on the "this is what I believe" hill. Show me what you believe by how you live and what you do. And that's why the word motivated is there at 5 and not just aware or understanding or like having a strong belief system. Motivation, meaning how that belief system motivates and embodies your life, is where I would want to get to. Because like you said, what we're trying to create here is health. And a really, really healthy person is a person who has vitality. And a person who has vitality is a person who impacts the world around them. And that's hard to do without this awareness and connection to the thing that's much, much bigger than you are. Why you can't just hand this to somebody and be like, figure it out. Like, there's a lot of personal work that's got to be done for that.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. This has been really fun. So just to wrap it up, obviously you take all 5 of those scores, you get a 5-factor total. All the way to the left of the sick is you score 15 to 25. Moving to well, you get 39 to 51, and all the way to fit, 65 to 75. So again, even though with Jamison's caveat that this is done much, much better with an experienced coach, score yourself, see where we're at. I think that's a worthwhile exercise. And then obviously what we do with it each individually, or maybe what we do with it here as we continue this conversation, Jamison, I think is a question mark, but I'm really excited to keep exploring with you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear results too, because that's going to help us refine this process as we figure out, like, outside of the people I work with, particularly inside of our CrossFit gym, like, if we're going to build this thing out, getting the data and the metrics of this community that's listening, taking this and being like, hey, I really think I scored a 39, but I really feel like I should have scored a 52 or something like that. Like, having the feedback from this makes sense to me in terms of us continuing to refine it moving forward.
Yep. Agreed. So leave some comments, send us some notes. I think this should become a big part of what this kind of community that we're building is about. I think these kinds of conversations I started this conversation with you about, let's take this all out of the clouds and actually start to figure out how we can bring these principles into practice. And so to me, this is a really interesting, obvious, valuable place for all of us and kind of us collectively and all of us individually to move towards. And so I'm excited about that. And thank you, Jamison. Real quick before we go, 2 things. 1, if you're not yet subscribed wherever you happen to be listening to this, hey, now's a good time to do that. That way you won't miss another episode and your life will be better. 2, chasingexcellence.email. Get on the free newsletter list. We send out an email on the weekends with a link to a form. You can submit questions. We can bring them into future episodes. You can also find that chat feature, which I mentioned at the top of this episode. And you can also, if you are so inclined, join us inside of the Chase Club. You'll get ad-free episodes, bonus content, book clubs, more things that we're figuring out what to do with there. ChasingExcellence.email. Thank you so very much. Ben and I will be back soon for a brand new episode of Chasing Excellence.